I'm going to tell you about a girl who had more grit than most men I've known. Here's how it started. December 20th, 1889, South Pass City, Wyoming Territory. 8 degrees above zero, wind cutting through your coat like it had a personal grudge. The church bell rang 3 times, wedding call, and folks filed in with their heads down, not meeting each other's eyes. Tessa Mercer stood at the altar in a borrowed dress 2 sizes too large. 24 years old, her father 3 months in the ground. The smell of coal smoke and damp wool filled that white clapboard church, and frost had crept across every window like God himself didn't want to watch what was about to happen. Cole Briggs, Silas Sohan's hired gun, pressed a rifle barrel against her ribs, not hard enough to leave a mark, just hard enough so she'd feel it with every breath. "Say I do, Miss Mercer," he whispered. "Or your father's ranch burns by morning. Water rights go with it." 40 townspeople watched, nobody moved. The preacher stammered through the vows, sweating despite the cold. Tessa's hand gripped the pew edge. Her father had carved that wood, little wolf head in the grain. Silas Sohan sat in the front row, his cattle brand ring catching the candlelight, circle S, like he owned everything it touched. She looked at that ring, then at the window. "I do," she whispered. Then she kicked the candlestick sideways, vaulted the pew rail, and threw herself through the side window. Glass exploded into the snow like 1,000 diamonds. From somewhere up the mountain, a wolf howled. High note, low note, high again. Danger, not greeting. Her father had taught her that. She hit the ground running. Her horse, Dancer, a bay mare with 3 white socks, carried her 8 miles into the blizzard. Tessa had grabbed the reins outside the church, still wearing that borrowed dress, and pointed the mare's nose toward the mountains, toward her father's old hunting grounds. The wind hit 20 below by the time she reached the creek, maybe colder. Hard to tell when your face stops feeling anything. The wedding dress had frozen stiff against her legs, cutting through her stockings with every stride. She could taste blood where she'd bit her lip going through that window. Dancer stumbled twice. The second time, the mare went down to her knees in a snowdrift and didn't want to get back up. Tessa dismounted, grabbed the bridle, and pulled. Her hands had gone numb an hour ago. "Come on, girl. It ain't far now. It was far. Another mile, maybe 2. But horses don't know the difference between truth and hope. And sometimes hope's enough to keep moving." The cabin appeared through the snow like a ghost taking shape. 12 feet by 14, stone fireplace on the north wall, log walls chinked with moss. Her father had built it 20 years back, before she was born. A hunting shack for when the elk came down from the high country. The door hung open. Tessa stopped, listened past the wind, no sound from inside. But fresh ash sat in the stove. She could see it through the doorway, gray against the snow that had blown in, and boot prints, size 12, maybe, too big for her father. He'd been a small man. She tied Dancer to the porch post and picked up a length of firewood from the pile. Not much of a weapon, but better than bare hands. Inside, the cabin smelled of cold stone and old smoke. Someone had been here recently. The ash was only a few days old. A tin cup sat on the shelf, and when she touched it, her fingers came away clean. No dust. But whoever it was had gone. The single room stood empty except for her father's old cot, the stove, and a workbench scarred with knife marks. She got the fire going. Her water canteen had frozen solid, so she packed it with snow and set it by the flames. The dress would have to come off. Frozen fabric would kill her faster than the cold, but she had nothing else to wear. Her father's spare coat hung on a nail. It would have to do. While the snow melted, she tackled the chimney. Couldn't risk smoke backing up in the night. She climbed onto the bench and reached up into the flue, scraping away 3 years of soot and bird nest. Something fell, not soot, something wrapped in oilcloth, heavy as a book. Tessa caught it before it hit the floor. The cloth was tied with twine, knotted 3 times. Her father's knots, she'd know them anywhere. Her hands shook as she unwound the string. Papers. Legal papers, folded careful and tight, on top a land deed. "Tessa, if you're reading this, Sohan forced my hand. Original deed is your birthright. Find Caleb Hale. He knows the truth. Pa." The deed was dated June 1867, 22 years old. It granted John Mercer, her father, 320 acres along Sweet Creek, witnessed by Judge Morrison, and signed by the territorial surveyor, C. Hale. At the wedding, Silas's papers had been dated March 1888, 21 years newer. Her father hadn't sold the ranch. Silas had forged the deed. Tessa pressed the oilcloth packet against her chest. Her father had known. He'd hidden the proof and told her where to find it, in the one place Silas wouldn't think to look. A scratching sound came from the door, small paws, claws on wood, then a whimper, high and thin and hurt. She crossed to the door, fire poker in one hand, and opened it a crack. A wolf pup sat in the snow. 4 months old, maybe 5? His right front paw was bleeding, leaving red drops in the white. He looked up at her with amber eyes and whimpered again. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. Then she heard it, hoofbeats, muffled by snow but coming closer. Multiple horses, moving slow up the valley. The pup's ears flattened. He growled, a sound too big for his small body. And the growl broke into that same howl she'd heard at the church. High, low, high, danger. Tessa scooped the pup into her arms, kicked the door shut, and shoved the deed packet into her bodice. Her free hand found the poker again. Outside, the hoofbeats stopped. The hoofbeats passed by, heading north toward the high country. Not searching, just passing through. Tessa let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The pup squirmed in her arms, leaving blood smears on her father's coat. She set him by the fire and examined the paw. Deep cut but clean, nothing broken. She tore a strip from the wedding dress and bound it tight. "There now," she said. "You'll live." And the pup licked her hand. First warm thing that had touched her since morning. 3 days passed. The storm cleared. Tessa set snares for rabbits and melted snow for water. The pup, she'd started calling him Asher, stayed close, limping on 3 legs. His wound was healing, but he kept looking toward the door and whining. On the 4th morning, she followed him outside. He limped straight down to the creek, 60 yards below the cabin. The water ran fast here, too swift to freeze solid, but ice had formed along the banks. Asher stopped at the edge and howled. That same 3-note warning. Tessa saw why. 50 feet upstream, wedged in the ice jam, something moved, small and dark and desperate. Another pup, trapped where a log had fallen across the current. The water surged around it, pulling at its legs. "Hell and damnation," she muttered. She couldn't leave it. Her father's voice echoed in her head. "Mercy ain't weakness. It's the tax we pay for staying human." Tessa unlaced her boots, her good boots, the only pair she had, and set them on the bank. The creek water hit her feet like 1,000 knives. 34 degrees, maybe colder. Her toes went numb before she'd taken 3 steps. The current pulled at her skirt. She'd cut the frozen wedding dress into breeches, but the fabric still caught the water, dragging her sideways. She grabbed a branch overhead and pulled herself forward. The sound of rushing water filled her ears. The trapped pup saw her coming and struggled harder. Its paw slipped. It fell into the current, caught itself on the log, hung there by its front legs. "Don't you dare," Tessa said. She lunged forward, water up to her chest now. Her fingers closed on wet fur. She yanked the pup free and turned back toward shore, but her foot slipped on a rock. The current took her legs out from under her. Cold water closed over her head. She kicked hard, broke the surface, gasped. Her lips had already gone blue. Early hypothermia. She knew the signs. Couldn't feel her hands. The pup's weight pulled her down. Not like this. She found footing, pushed toward the bank. Asher barked from the shore, sharp, urgent. Her knees hit mud. She crawled the last few feet and collapsed on the frozen grass. The rescued pup clutched against her chest. Asher licked her face. Both pups pressed against her, trying to share warmth. It took her an hour to make it back to the cabin. By then, she couldn't stop shaking. She stripped by the fire, wrapped both pups in her father's blanket, and forced herself to drink hot water. Her reflection in the window showed a stranger, lips purple, hair wild, eyes hollow. Behind her reflection, something moved in the trees. She spun around, stared at the window. A man's silhouette, tall, watching, then gone. When she reached the door, boot prints marked the snow. Size 12, leading to the cabin, then away into the forest, fresh, maybe 5 minutes old. Whoever'd been using this cabin was still around. And he was watching her. The next morning, she found the wolf pup's mother, 20 yards downstream, half buried in snow. Shot through the chest, clean kill, probably from a rifle. The wound was 2 days old. Tessa buried her in a shallow grave. It was the best she could do with frozen ground. Near the body, she found a spent shell casing. Brass, stamped with a cavalry mark. She'd seen her father's old military gear enough to recognize it. Cavalry carbines used a specific cartridge. Civilians didn't carry them. She pocketed the shell and headed back to the cabin with both pups trailing behind. That night, she made a decision. She needed to know what Silas was telling people. Needed to understand how far his reach went. South Pass City was 6 miles downslope. She waited until after dark, then rode Dancer to the edge of town. Left the mare tied in a stand of pines and crept forward on foot. The smell of wood smoke and horse manure drifted on the wind. A crowd had gathered outside the general store. 20 people, maybe more. Silas Sohan stood on the porch, and Marshal Wade Garrett stood beside him, hammer and nails in hand. Tessa slipped into the shadow of the livery stable and watched. The marshal unrolled a poster and nailed it to the board. Even from 50 feet away, Tessa could read the bold print. Wanted, Tessa Mercer. Silas's voice carried across the frozen street. That girl stole legal property, namely herself, from her lawful husband. She destroyed church property and endangered livestock. I'm offering $200 for her return, or a share in the new water rights cooperative. $200, more than most men made in a year. Marshal Garrett read from a paper. Tessa Mercer is wanted for abandonment of marriage contract, theft of documents, and destruction of property. Bring her in, by law. A rancher in a worn coat spoke up. Her father didn't sell that land, Silas. Everybody knows it. Her father signed the deed in my presence, Silas said smoothly. Judge Morrison witnessed it. All legal and proper. The girl's just a thief trying to steal back what ain't hers no more. Where's the judge now? Another man called. Dead, Silas said. 6 months ago. God rest him. But the deed stands. Tessa's hands curled into fists. Judge Morrison had witnessed her father's deed in 1867. He'd been dead for 2 years. She'd attended the funeral. Silas was lying, and half the town knew it, but nobody was willing to call him out. I'll add this, Silas continued. Anybody who captures the girl gets a $50 share in my water monopoly. That's guaranteed income, friends. $5 a month, permanent. 3 ranchers nodded. One shook Silas's hand. The marshal caught Tessa's eye across the darkness, or thought he did. His hand moved towards his gun. She melted back into the shadows and ran. Behind her, Silas's voice floated on the wind. She stole documents proving ownership. I need her and those papers. Find them both, and this valley is secure. Tessa made it back to Dancer and rode hard for the cabin. Her father's deed burned against her skin where she'd hidden it. The legal door had just slammed shut. She was wanted by law, and Silas had just bought half the town. December 24th. Christmas Eve, though Tessa hadn't thought about it till she saw the date scratched on the cabin wall, her father's marks, counting hunting seasons. She woke to the smell of fresh meat. At first she thought she'd dreamed it. But when she opened the door, a venison haunch hung from the porch beam, wrapped in clean cloth, still warm, butchered with military precision, clean cuts, no waste. Beside it sat a jar of bear grease, a bundle of willow bark tied with string, and a wool blanket folded in a perfect square. The pups, both of them now. She couldn't bring herself to turn the rescued one away, growled low in their throats. Asher limped to the doorway and sniffed the air, confused. Not threat scent, something else. Tessa scanned the tree line, nothing moved. Fresh snow had fallen in the night, and boot prints led straight to her door, size 12, the same ones from before. But no prints led away. She grabbed the gifts and pulled them inside, barred the door. Her hands shook as she examined them. The bear grease jar had a stamp on the lid, faint but unmistakable. U.S. Cavalry insignia. The willow bark was tied with an unusual knot, loops within loops. Professional, deliberate. Someone was watching over her. Someone who knew she was here, knew she was alone, and instead of turning her in for $200, he was keeping her alive. She didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified. The next morning, the same thing. Firewood, stacked neat by the door. A tin of coffee, real coffee, not chicory. Another bundle of herbs. The morning after that, December 26th, she found kindling split to perfect size for her stove and a leather pouch of salt. Each time, the boot prints led to her door. Each time, none led away. On the third morning, she left a note pinned to the door, "Thank you." Why? When she checked at noon, the note was gone. In its place, someone had carved a single word into a wood chip, duty. Doc Beatrice Hollis arrived on the 4th day. Tessa heard the horse before she saw it. A distinctive gait, 3 beats instead of 4. The bay gelding had thrown a shoe 2 years back and never walked quite right after. Tessa recognized the sound. She grabbed her father's rifle and waited by the window. Doc dismounted slowly. 48 years old, gray streaks in her dark hair, medical bag over one shoulder. She called out before approaching. "Tessa Mercer, it's Beatrice Hollis. I'm alone. And I'm armed. But I'm not here to collect any bounty. I'm here because your father was my friend." The smell of carbolic soap carried on the wind. Doc always smelled like that, sharp and clean, like she was ready to perform surgery at any moment. Tessa opened the door a crack. "How'd you find me?" "Your father showed me this place years ago." Doc stepped closer, hands visible and empty. "Said if anything ever happened to him, I should check here first. Took me a while to get away without being followed." Asher sniffed at Doc's boots. The pup's tail wagged, cautious but not hostile. "Silas's men are planning to search every line cabin in the territory," Doc said. "Starting New Year's Day. That's 6 days from now. They'll find you if you stay." Tessa led her inside. The cabin felt smaller with another person in it. Doc set her bag on the bench and looked around, taking inventory like she was preparing for a medical emergency. "I can't hide you," Doc said, "but I can slow them down. I'll tell the marshal you headed east towards Cheyenne. That'll buy you a week, maybe 2. Why would you risk that?" Doc's smile was bitter. "Because Silas Sohan took my land claim in 1880 using the same forged deed trick he used on your father. I had no proof, you do." She touched Tessa's arm. "Win, and 10 families get their land back. That's worth more than my medical license." Tessa pulled out her father's deed and spread it on the table. "You know who this surveyor is? C. Hale?" "Caleb Hale." Doc's finger traced the signature. "He and your father surveyed this territory together in 67. Mapped every claim from here to Laramie. He's been living up in these hills the last 3 years. ever since his wife died in childbirth. Your father visited him every month until the end. The gifts, the boot prints, the cavalry carbine shell. He's the one leaving food, Tessa said. Doc nodded. Caleb Hale was a cavalry scout before he was a surveyor. If he's protecting you, then you're safer than you know, but you're also in more danger. Why? Doc reached into her bag and pulled out a small leather journal. Your father gave me this before he died, said if anything happened to him, give it to you. It's his medical records, including Silas Sohan's. She opened to a page marked with a ribbon. Tessa read the entry dated March 1888. Patient Silas Sohan, treated for syphilis, 3rd stage. Mercury burns on torso. Mental deterioration noted. Violent episodes increasing. Recommend institutionalization. Patient refused treatment. He's sick, Tessa whispered. He's dying, Doc corrected. And desperate men do desperate things. Silas needs to consolidate his holdings before the sickness takes his mind completely. He needs you silenced and that deed destroyed. But more than that, Doc tapped the surveyor's signature. He needs Caleb Hale dead, because Caleb signed every legitimate deed in this territory. He knows where all of Silas's forgeries are buried. The wood in the stove popped. Both pups raised their heads. Outside, a branch snapped. Doc grabbed her bag. That's my signal to leave. I told them I was checking trap lines. If I'm gone too long, be careful. Doc paused at the door. New Year's Day, they start searching. Don't be here. She mounted her gelding and rode down the trail. Tessa watched from the window until Doc disappeared into the trees. Then she saw him, the silhouette in the pines, tall, still, watching. She raised her hand, a tentative wave. The figure didn't move. But a moment later, a wolf howl echoed from that exact spot. Not the danger call. Something else. Acknowledgement, maybe, or promise. Then he was gone, and Tessa was alone with 2 wolf pups in a deed that could save 10 families or get them all killed. She looked down at the journal Doc had left behind. At the carved wood chip that said duty. Caleb Hale wasn't just protecting her. He was protecting the truth. Dawn on December 30th came quiet. Too quiet. Tessa woke to the pups growling, low and steady, both of them staring at the door. The fire had burned down to coals. Outside, no birds sang. The wind had died completely. She reached for the rifle and crossed to the window. 3 riders sat their horses in the clearing. Steam rose from the animals' nostrils in the frozen air. The men wore heavy coats and each carried a rifle across his saddle. Cole Briggs sat in the middle, the man who'd pressed a gun to her ribs at the wedding. To his left, a thin man with a scar across his cheek. To his right, someone younger, maybe 20, nervous hands on his reins. They weren't moving, just watching the cabin, waiting. Tessa's breath came shallow. 3 men, 1 rifle. 2 bullets left. She'd use the others on rabbits. Even if she was the best shot in Wyoming, the math didn't favor her. The door rattled, not from inside. Someone on the porch. She spun, rifle up. Get back from the door, a man's voice. Deep, calm, not threatening. Bar it, don't come out till I say. Through the window, she saw him. Tall, over 6 feet, wearing a cavalry coat worn gray at the shoulders, graying beard, cold blue eyes. He carried a Henry rifle like it was part of his arm. He moved past her door and stepped off the porch, putting himself between the cabin and the 3 riders. Caleb Hale. It had to be. Well, hell, Cole Briggs said. His horse shifted nervously. You're supposed to be dead, Hale. Disappointed? Caleb's voice carried easy across the clearing. No fear in it, just fact. Silas will pay double for your head. Cole leaned forward in his saddle. That girl's wanted by law. You're harboring a fugitive. Law ain't been to these hills in 3 years. Caleb didn't move, didn't raise his rifle. Just stood there like a man who'd already decided what was going to happen. Git. The scarred man laughed. You plan to take all 3 of us? If I have to. Cole's smile faded. Silas owns this territory. Water, land, law. You got no claim here. I surveyed this claim in June 1867. Caleb's voice dropped, got colder. Tessa Mercer's father held the original deed. I signed it, witnessed it, and I'll testify to it in any court you want. You're on her land, which makes you trespassers. The young rider's horse danced sideways. The kid was scared. Tessa could see it in how tight he held the reins. Last chance, Caleb said. Ride out. Tell Silas I'm alive, I'm armed, and I remember every deed I signed in this territory. Tell him if he wants to press this, I'll bury him in federal court. Cole's hand moved toward his rifle. Don't. Caleb's Henry came up smooth. Not fast, didn't need to be fast, just certain. You ain't quick enough, Cole, never were. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. The only sound was wind starting up again, rattling through the pines. Then the young rider broke. I ain't dying for $200. He wheeled his horse and galloped back down the trail. The scarred man spat in the snow. "This ain't over." "It is for today," Caleb said. Cole stared at Tessa through the window. She stared back. His eyes held something ugly. Not just greed, but the promise of violence. "Silas says you stole papers," Cole called. "Says you got proof he don't want seen. Hand them over, and maybe we let you both walk away." "Maybe ain't good enough," Caleb said. Cole nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer, like he'd wanted it. "Your funeral, old man." The two riders turned and headed down the trail. Slow, no hurry. The scarred man looked back twice. Caleb didn't lower his rifle until they disappeared into the trees. Then he turned toward the cabin. Tessa opened the door. Up close, he looked older than she'd expected. Lines around his eyes, gray in his beard, scars on his hands, old scars faded white. He smelled of leather and gun oil and wood smoke. His eyes were the coldest blue she'd ever seen, but they weren't cruel, just tired. "Caleb Hale?" "Ma'am." He nodded once. "Your father was my friend. I'm sorry for your loss." "Those men will be back." He glanced at the trail. "With more friends. They're testing me, seeing if I'll run." Will you?" His smile was thin. "I stopped running 3 years ago." He looked past her into the cabin. "You got food? Water?" "Some." "Get it ready, we're leaving in—" The shot came from the trees, no warning. Just the crack of a rifle and Caleb spinning sideways, Henry falling from his hands. Tessa saw the scarred man in the pines, 40 yards out, smoke rising from his rifle barrel. The ambush. They'd circled back. Caleb hit the ground hard. Blood spread across his left side just below the ribs. His hand reached for his rifle, but another shot kicked up snow next to his head. "Give me the deed." Cole Briggs rode back into the clearing, rifle aimed at Tessa. "Give it to me or I finish him." Asher exploded from the cabin, 60 pounds of fury and teeth. He hit Cole's horse in the shoulder, and the animal screamed and reared. Cole's rifle went off. The bullet went high, splintering wood above Tessa's head. The horse went over backwards. Cole hit the ground, rolled, came up running. Asher chased him into the trees, snarling. The scarred man swung his rifle toward the wolf. Tessa fired. Her father's rifle bucked against her shoulder. The scarred man's horse bolted. The man went down, screaming, clutching his leg. She dropped the rifle and ran to Caleb. He was trying to sit up, his face gray, breath coming in short gasps. "Inside," he managed. "Get me inside." And he weighed more than any man she'd ever lifted. 180, maybe more. All of it, muscle and bone and dead weight. She got her shoulder under his arm and pulled. Her boots slipped in the snow. Blood, his blood, left a red trail across the white ground. The cabin was only 40 feet away. It felt like 40 miles. She got him through the door and kicked it shut behind them. The bar fell into place. Caleb collapsed against the wall, his hand pressed to his side. Blood seeped between his fingers. "Deed," he gasped. "Where is it?" "Safe? Shut up and let me work." Both pups were inside now. Asher had returned, his muzzle red. The other pup pressed against Caleb's leg, whimpering. Outside, Cole's voice carried through the trees. Distant now, running. "You're both dead. You hear me? Silas don't just want the deed, he wants you both dead. You're the surveyor's witness. You know where all the forged claims are buried." The hoofbeats faded. Tessa tore Caleb's coat open. The bullet had gone through. She could see the exit wound in his back, blood pumping with each heartbeat. Through and through. That was luck. But the wound was 3 inches below his ribs, and she didn't know what the bullet had hit inside. "Can you breathe?" she asked. "Yeah." "Cough." He coughed. No blood came up. That was good. Lungs were clear. "You're going to live," she said. "But you're going to hate me first." His hand caught her wrist, surprisingly strong for a man losing blood. "The deed. Hide it. If they come back, I know." She pulled free. "Now be quiet. I need to hear myself think." She dragged him to the cot and laid him flat. His skin had gone cold and clammy, shock setting in. She piled both blankets on top of him, then got the fire roaring, water on to boil, the jar of bear grease he'd given her, willow bark, her father's sewing kit, and whiskey. She'd found a bottle in the root cellar 2 days ago, tucked behind a jar of pickles. Her father's emergency supply. This qualified. Caleb's breathing had gone shallow. His eyes were closed, but his jaw was clenched tight, fighting the pain. "Caleb," she touched his face. "Stay with me. You understand? Don't you dare die in my cabin. I just got the bloodstains out from the rabbits." His eyes opened. The ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Yes, ma'am." "Good." She uncorked the whiskey. "Now bite down on something, because this is gonna hurt like hell." Outside, the wind picked up. The temperature was dropping again. 20 below by nightfall, maybe colder. Inside, Tessa Mercer prepared to save the life of a man she'd met 5 minutes ago. A man who'd stood between her and 3 rifles without hesitation. A man her father had trusted. The water began to boil. The smell of whiskey and blood filled the cabin, and somewhere in the back of her mind, Cole's words echoed, "Silas wants you both dead. You're the surveyor's witness?" They weren't just hunting her anymore. They were hunting the truth. And Caleb Hale was the only man alive who could prove it. She stripped his shirt away first. The wound underneath was ugly, ragged hole the size of a silver dollar, blood welling up faster than she could wipe away. The exit wound in his back was worse, bigger. The bullet had tumbled going through, but it had missed the kidney. She was almost sure of it, 3 inches too high. "This is going to be bad," she said. "Already is." She poured whiskey directly into the wound. Caleb's scream filled the cabin. His back arched off the cot. He bit down on the leather belt she'd shoved in his mouth, and the sound that came out of him was more animal than man. The pups retreated to the corner, whining. Tessa held him down with one hand and poured again. The whiskey bubbled in the wound, pink foam rising. Good, that meant it was cleaning. She poured a third time, then pressed a cloth against the hole to slow the bleeding. "Worst part's done," she lied. She'd collected sphagnum moss from the creek bank 2 days ago. Her mother had taught her that before she died. Moss from running water, dried by the fire, packed into wounds. Natural antibiotic. The Frontier doctors didn't know why it worked, just that it did. She packed the wound tight. Caleb's breathing had gone ragged. Sweat stood out on his forehead despite the cold. Next came the hot knife. She held the blade in the fire until it glowed red, then used it to cauterize the smaller bleeders around the wound's edge. The smell of burning flesh mixed with the wood smoke. Caleb's hand found the bed frame and gripped it so hard the wood cracked. "Almost done," she whispered. "Hold on." The stitching was the worst part. She'd never sewn human flesh before, only rabbit hides and torn clothes, but skin was skin. She used horsehair from Dancer's tail, 12 stitches pulled tight, each one making Caleb's whole body tense. When she finished the entry wound, she rolled him onto his side and started on his back. Bigger hole, more stitches, 23 in all. By the time she wrapped him with bear grease-soaked wool, he'd stopped screaming. Just lay there breathing hard, eyes closed. "Drink this." She forced willow bark tea between his lips. Bitter stuff, but it would help with the pain and fever. He swallowed, coughed, swallowed again. "Thank you," he managed. "Don't thank me yet. Fever's coming." It came that night. His temperature climbed till his skin felt like the stovetop. She bathed his face with cool water, but it evaporated as fast as she applied it. He thrashed on the cot, calling out names she didn't recognize, calling for someone named Martha. "Martha, don't, the baby's coming too early." His eyes were open but unseeing. Doc says, shh. Tessa pressed a cool cloth to his forehead. "You're safe. Just rest." Can't lose them both. Can't. Then, around midnight, he started talking about something else. Words tumbling out in the delirium. "Ledger, Silas's ledger. His wife has it. She's scared. Can't stay. Told Draven." Tessa leaned closer. "What ledger?" "Every crime. Wrote it down. Paranoid. His wife. She knows. Eliza knows." His hand grabbed hers. Squeezed hard. Can't let him win. Too many families. 12 years of theft. Then he went quiet. His breathing slowed. The fever broke just before dawn, sweat soaking the blankets. Tessa collapsed against the wall, exhausted. Both pups curled up beside her. Outside, the sky was turning gray. December 31st, New Year's Eve. She'd saved him, probably, if infection didn't set in. But what he'd said in the fever, that stayed with her. Silas's wife had evidence. A ledger. And someone named Draven knew about it. Caleb woke at noon. His eyes were clear, focused. The fever had passed. "How long?" His voice was hoarse. 12 hours, give or take." She handed him water. "You remember anything?" "Getting shot. You dragging me inside. Then nothing." "You talked. In the fever." He closed his eyes. "What did I say?" "That Silas's wife has a ledger. Evidence. And someone named Draven knows." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You saved my life. You stood between me and 3 rifles. We're even." "No, ma'am, we ain't." He tried to sit up, winced, gave up. "Help me see that deed." Tessa pulled it from her bodice and unfolded it on the cot beside him. Caleb studied it, his finger tracing the signature at the bottom. "That's my hand," he said. "June 18th, 1867, your father's claim. I remember that day. Hot as blazes, black flies everywhere. We surveyed from the creek, north to the Pine Ridge, east to the boundary stones, 320 acres. Judge Morrison witnessed. Your father paid the filing fee, $12, and I signed it official. Silas's deed says March 1888. Forgery." Caleb's voice was flat. "Wrong ink. I used iron gall ink in 67. Turns brown after 20 years. His would still be black. Wrong paper, too. We used 20-pound linen stock. His is probably wood pulp. And the notary seal." He squinted at the deed. That's wrong. Territorial seal changed in 1875. His would have the new seal, not the old one." Now, you can prove all that? In court? Yes, ma'am, if we can get to a federal judge. He lay back, breathing hard from the effort. But Silas knows I can. That's why he wants me dead. Tessa sat down beside the cot. Tell me about Martha. Pain crossed his face, different from the bullet wound, deeper. My wife died 3 years ago. Childbirth, baby died too. He stared at the ceiling. I was in Laramie, surveying a railroad claim. Got the telegram 2 days late. By the time I rode home, they were both in the ground. I'm sorry. I came up here after that. Built a camp in the high country. Your father found me 6 months later. Brought supplies every month. Tried to talk me into coming back down. I never did. Why protect me now? Caleb's blue eyes met hers. Because your father asked me to. Last time I saw him, November maybe, he said Silas was squeezing him. Said, if anything happened, I should watch over you. He knew you'd run rather than marry that snake. He coughed, grimaced. And because it's the right thing to do, I signed those deeds. I witnessed the truth. If I let Silas bury it, then 12 years of surveying don't mean a damn thing. I wonder how many families. What? How many families did Silas cheat? Caleb thought about it. Your father makes 6. But I know of 5 more where the original deed don't match what's in the land office. Maybe more. 11 families. Minimum. That's, he did the math in his head. Maybe 3,500 acres total, worth $20,000-$30,000 at current prices. Tessa whistled low. That's a fortune. Oh, that's why he'll kill to keep it. She unfolded her father's note. Read it aloud. Find Caleb Hale. He knows the truth. I do, Caleb said. But knowing ain't enough. We need proof. Your deed, that's 1 piece. My testimony, that's 2 pieces. But what we really need is Silas's ledger. His wife Eliza has it, if what I heard is right. She's wife number 3. The first 2 died under suspicious circumstances. Who's Draven? Draven Moss, old bounty hunter. Silas hired him 20 years ago to, Caleb paused, to persuade people to sell cheap, burned barns, killed livestock, roughed up a few homesteaders. Your father was one of them back in '85. Draven scared him good, but John held out. Where's Draven now? Dying, last I heard. Consumption, maybe 6 months left. Guilty men sometimes look for redemption at the end. Caleb shifted on the cot, testing his wound. If we could find him, get him to testify. We can't go to the marshal. He issued a warrant. Can't go to the land office. Clerks bought and paid for. Caleb closed his eyes. We're trapped. Can't hide forever. Can't fight the law. Can't prove anything without more evidence. Outside, the wind picked up, but it didn't sound as cold as before. The worst of winter was passing. January was coming, and with it, the thaw. Tessa stood and walked to the window. The snow was already starting to melt around the south-facing rocks, patches of brown earth showing through. Doc Hollis helped me, she said. That's 1 ally, and you, that's 2. Maybe there are others. People Silas has hurt, people who'd stand with us if they knew we had proof. Maybe. Caleb's voice was tired. But we'd need a plan, and time to heal. I can't fight anybody like this. Tessa turned from the window. Then we rest, we plan, and when you're strong enough, we find Draven Moss and Silas's wife. We get that ledger, and we make Silas answer for every family he's robbed. Caleb smiled, a real smile this time, not bitter. Your father said you had sand. He was right. Both pups had climbed onto the cot, curled up against Caleb's legs, keeping him warm. The fire crackled. The smell of bear grease and healing herbs filled the cabin. Outside, winter was loosening its grip. Spring was still months away, but it was coming. And with it, a reckoning. 2 weeks passed. Caleb mended faster than any man had a right to. By January 10th, he was sitting up. By the 12th, he could walk to the door and back without bleeding through the bandages. By the 14th, he insisted on writing. Doc said you need another week, Tessa argued. Doc ain't here, and we need to know what Silas is telling people. He buckled his gun belt with careful movements. You can come with me or stay here, but I'm going. They rode to South Pass City after dark. The temperature had climbed into the 30s, warm for January, and the snow was melting into slush. The sound of dripping water was everywhere. Mud season starting early. They left the horses in the pines and approached on foot. Tessa's boots squelched in the half-frozen mud. The smell of horse manure and wood smoke drifted on the damp air. A crowd had gathered outside the church, bigger than before. 50 people, maybe 60. Lanterns hung from the porch posts, casting yellow light across faces Tessa had known her whole life. Silas Sowen stood on the church steps. Marshal Garrett beside him again, hammer in hand. Tessa and Caleb crouched behind the livery stable, close enough to hear. The marshal unrolled a new poster, larger than the first. Bold letters, visible even from 100 feet away. Wanted, Caleb Hale. Caleb Hale, the marshal read, his voice flat and tired. Wanted for the murder of Deputy Cole Briggs. Cole ain't dead, someone in the crowd muttered. Kidnapping of Tessa Mercer, theft of territorial survey records, and conspiracy to defraud the territory. Reward, $500, dead or alive. 500, more than a working man made in 2 years. Silas stepped forward. He looked thinner than Tessa remembered. His hands shook slightly when he gestured. The syphilis was getting worse. Friends, Silas said, I come to you with a heavy heart. Tessa Mercer, that poor, confused girl, has been led astray by an older man, a man who once held a position of trust in this territory. Caleb Hale has convinced her they're lovers, has filled her head with lies about her father's land claim. Her father didn't sell, a woman called out. Mrs. Jensen, the seamstress. Everybody knows John Mercer would never. Her father sold legally, Silas interrupted smoothly. In my presence. Judge Morrison witnessed it. I paid him $600, fair price for worked land. The deed's registered proper in the land office. Then why you need the girl? Someone else asked. Because she stole papers, private papers proving other claims I've legally acquired, and because, Silas's voice dropped, turned sad. I worry for her safety. Caleb Hale is a dangerous man. Unbalanced, since his wife's death, he's been living in the wilderness like an animal. Who knows what he's capable of? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, others looked uncertain. I'm offering $500 for information leading to their capture. And I'm organizing a community vote, January 15th, tomorrow night, on restructuring the water rights. Every family deserves a say in how we manage our shared resources. The 2 ranchers in the back shook their heads and left, but 3 others stayed, leaning in to hear more. Marshal Garrett nailed the poster to the board. When he turned, Tessa saw his face in the lantern light. He looked 10 years older. The lines around his mouth had deepened. That girl's father was my friend, the marshal said quietly. Not to the crowd, to Silas. You sure about all this? I'm sure the law is on my side, Silas replied. Unless you're questioning that? The marshal said nothing, just picked up his hammer and walked back to his office. Caleb touched Tessa's arm. Time to go. They retreated into the darkness, but on the way back to the horses they heard voices. 2 men talking behind the general store. Half the town believes him. The other half's too scared to speak up. What about the small ranchers? The ones he's squeezing? Johnson signed over his water rights yesterday. Said he couldn't afford the fight. That's 5 of the 6 holdouts gone. Only the Swenson place left. And they're about to lose their cattle from lack of water. Caleb's jaw tightened. Tessa could feel the anger coming off him like heat. They made it back to their horses without being seen. The ride back to the cabin was silent. The next day, January 15th, someone came to the cabin. Not Silas's men, someone else. Tessa heard the horse first, different gait, lighter step, then a woman's voice calling from the trees. Tessa Mercer, Caleb Hale, I'm alone. I need to speak with you. Please, I don't have much time. Caleb positioned himself by the window, rifle ready. Tessa opened the door a crack. A woman stood in the clearing, 28, maybe 30, dark hair pulled back severe, fine clothes, too fine for riding through the mountains, now mud-splattered and torn. Her face was pale, and her hands shook. Behind her, a second horse carried an old man, gaunt, hollow-cheeked, bent over his saddle like each breath hurt. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound, and spat blood into the snow. Eliza Sohan, the woman said, Silas's wife. And this is Draven Moss. We have something you need to see. They met at an abandoned mining camp 3 miles north, safer than the cabin. If this was a trap, better to spring it away from home. But when Eliza dismounted and pulled a leather-bound ledger from her saddlebag, Tessa knew it wasn't a trap. The woman's fear was too real. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped it. I'm wife number 3, Eliza said without preamble. Sarah, wife number 1, died of pneumonia 4 years ago. I saw the pillow marks on her face. Rebecca, wife number 2, fell down the stairs 2 years ago. I heard them arguing beforehand. Heard the push. She thrust the ledger at Tessa. He'll kill me next. This ledger is my insurance and your proof. Tessa opened it. Page after page of entries in cramped handwriting, dates, names, amounts. March 12th, 1888. Paid land clerk J. Harrison $200 to backdate deed for Mercer Ranch. Forged, Judge Morrison's signature, Judge dead 1887 won't protest. June 3rd, 1888. Paid Judge Whitman $500 to declare water monopoly legal under territorial statute. Judge agreed after persuasion. Sept 17, 1888, hired C. Briggs to burn Jacobson barn, $100 bonus if no witnesses. Barn destroyed, Jacobson family left territory. December 2nd, 1888. Telegraph operator paid $50 a month to intercept federal mail regarding land disputes. March 8th, 1889. Doc Hollis refused $300 bribe to falsify death certificate for Rebecca. Consider intimidation tactics. November 14th, 1889. J. Mercer won't sign water rights waiver. Arrange accident. Paid Briggs $150. Tessa's vision blurred. November 16th was the day her father died. 2 days after that entry. Sweet Jesus, Caleb whispered. He'd been reading over her shoulder. This is enough to hang him 10 times over. Draven Moss coughed again, that awful wet sound. When he pulled his handkerchief away, it was spotted with red. He looked at them with eyes that had seen too much and regretted most of it. I'm 67 years old, he said, his voice like gravel. Dying of consumption. Doc says maybe 4 months left, maybe 6. I worked for Silas from 1870 to 1885, 15 years of sin. Another cough. I intimidated homesteaders, burned barns, killed 2 men in what they called fair fights. Quit when Silas told me to kill a family. Man, woman, 3 children. I said no. He let me walk because I knew where too many bodies were buried. Why come forward now? Tessa asked. Because I'm dying anyway. Draven's smile was bitter. Might as well die with a clean soul. I'll testify to everything. Every crime, every threat, every family we drove off their land. Eliza wrapped her arms around herself. Silas knows I took the ledger. He'll figure it out tonight when he goes looking for it. He keeps it in a locked safe in his office. I have had the combination. She looked at the sky. Maybe 6 hours before he discovers it's gone. After that, he'll come for me, and he'll destroy every record in the territory. We take this to the marshal, Tessa said. The marshal issued a warrant against you, Eliza countered. He won't listen. He will, Caleb said quietly. When he reads this, Wade Garrett's a lawman. He bent under pressure, but he ain't broken. Show him proof, and he'll do what's right. Draven nodded. There's something else you should know. That old wooden bridge over Sweet Creek, the one Silas uses to get out of the valley. The ice underneath is rotting. Won't hold more than 3 horses by spring, maybe less. I crossed it yesterday. Heard it cracking under my gelding. Why tell us that? Tessa asked. Because a cornered rat runs, Draven said. And Silas's only way out is that bridge. When this comes to a head, and it will, he'll bolt. You'll want someone stationed there. The smell of damp wool and horse sweat filled the air. Cold rain had started to fall. Not snow anymore, but rain. January thaw in earnest now. Eliza pulled her cloak tighter. I have one request. When this is over, when Silas is in custody, I want a divorce, legal and proper. And I want the marriage annulled, if possible. I won't be his widow. I won't carry his name. You'll have it, Caleb promised. Then let's move, Eliza said. Every minute we wait is a minute closer to him finding out. They mounted up, 4 riders in the rain. 2 fugitives, 1 dying man seeking redemption, and 1 terrified woman who'd finally found the courage to run. In Tessa's saddlebag, wrapped in oilcloth, was a ledger containing 12 years of crime. 12 years of theft, intimidation, and murder, enough to bring down a cattle king, if they could get it to the marshal before Silas destroyed the evidence, and if the marshal had the spine to use it. They rode straight to the marshal's office. 4 horses in the rain, mud splashing up from the street. It was past 9 o'clock. Most of South Pass City was dark, but Wade Garrett's lamp still burned. Tessa dismounted first. Caleb followed, moving slower. His wound wasn't fully healed, and the ride had opened something. Fresh blood seeped through his shirt. The marshal looked up when they walked in. His hand moved toward his gun, then stopped when he saw Eliza. Mrs. Sohan? I'm leaving my husband, she said, and I brought you this. She set the ledger on his desk. Marshal Garrett stared at it like it was a rattlesnake. What is it? Open it, Caleb said. The marshal did. His face went gray as he read, page after page. His finger moved down the entries, stopped at certain ones, moved on. When he reached the entry about Tessa's father, his hand started to shake. November 14th, J. Mercer won't sign? Arrange accident? The marshal's voice was barely a whisper. John died November 16th. Keep reading, Draven said from the doorway. He leaned against the frame, too weak to stand unsupported. The marshal read for another 5 minutes. When he finally looked up, he seemed to have aged a decade. This ledger proves Silas Sohan is a murderer and a thief. He closed it carefully. But if I arrest him, he'll call in every hired gun between here and Cheyenne. This town will burn. I need federal authority. Wyoming statehood is 6 months away, Doc Hollis said. Everyone turned. She stood in the doorway behind Draven, medical bag over her shoulder. I followed you from the mining camp. Figured you'd need a witness. She stepped inside. 6 months, Wade. How many people will die waiting? The marshal set the ledger down, picked up his badge, looked at it for a long time. I knew, he said quietly. I knew Silas was crooked. I knew it in my gut, but I had no proof. and he controlled the judge, the clerk, the telegraph operator. A lawman without evidence is just a man with a gun. You have evidence now, Tessa said. I issued a warrant against you because the law told me to. Wade Garrett looked at her. But the law's a tool. When a bad man holds it, it cuts the innocent. He unpinned the badge, set it on the desk beside the ledger. The metal clinked against the wood, small sound, final sound. Then we do this outside the law, he said. The door opened again. 4 men walked in, small ranchers, the ones who'd held out against Silas's water monopoly. Behind them came the blacksmith, the general store owner, and the preacher who'd performed the forced wedding. We heard, one rancher said. Whole town's talking. Mrs. Sohan rode through with Draven Moss. We figured something broke. It did, the marshal said. He opened the ledger and turned it so they could see. Read it, all of you. They read. As they did, their faces hardened. The blacksmith's hands curled into fist. The preacher bowed his head like he was praying. We can't wait for federal authority, the marshal said when they'd finished. Can't arrest Silas in town. Too many guns loyal to him. But tomorrow night, he's holding a community meeting, water rights vote, land office. He'll be there, thinking he's got the town in his pocket. We bring this, Caleb said, touching the ledger. Draven's testimony, Tessa's original deed, my surveyor records. We expose him in front of everyone. Make him defend his claim with 100 witnesses watching. Once it's public, Doc added. Federal territorial court can issue a warrant that supersedes local corruption. The preacher spoke up. Forgive me, Miss Mercer. I was a coward at that wedding. I'll stand with you now. One by one, the others nodded. He'll run if he's cornered, Draven said. His voice was getting weaker. Only way out of this valley is Sweet Creek Bridge. Station someone there, and be careful. The ice underneath won't hold much longer. I crossed it yesterday, heard it cracking. I'll cover the bridge, the blacksmith said. Wade Garrett picked up his badge, looked at it again, then pinned it back on. Tomorrow night, he said. 6 o'clock, land office, we end this. Midnight. Tessa and Caleb made it back to the cabin. The rain had stopped, but the temperature was dropping again. The mud would freeze by morning. They were unsaddling the horses when Asher's howl cut through the darkness. High, low, high, danger. Orange light flickered on the horizon, south toward the valley. Too bright to be a lantern, too big. Fire, Caleb said. They watched the flames grow. Not the cabin. They were at the cabin. Something else. Then they understood. The abandoned line cabin, the one Tessa had used first before finding this one. Silas's men were burning it, sending a message, or trying to flush them out. He knows, Tessa said, about the ledger. He knows. From somewhere down the mountain, they heard horses, multiple horses, moving fast through the darkness, coming their way. They didn't wait for Silas's men to find them. They rode to Doc Hollis's house in town, 2 miles closer, easier to defend, and spent the night there with rifles loaded and eyes on the windows. But no one came. Silas was making them wait, making them nervous. January 16th, 6 o'clock, the land office. Over 100 people packed the street outside. Every rancher in the valley, every merchant, women with children, old men who hadn't left their farms in years. Word had spread fast. Something was happening tonight, something that would decide the valley's future. Tessa stood on the land office steps beside Caleb, Marshal Garrett on her other side. Draven Moss sat on a chair someone had brought out, too weak to stand for long. Doc Hollis stood behind them. Eliza Sohan waited near the door, her face pale but determined. The territorial clerk, a nervous man named Peterson, had opened the official registry. His hands shook as he arranged papers on a makeshift table. Silas Sohan arrived with 6 armed men. He rode up like a king inspecting his domain. When he saw the crowd, he smiled. Quite a turnout for a water rights vote, he said. I'm flattered. This ain't about water rights, Marshal Garrett said. This is about land fraud and murder. The smile froze on Silas's face. His eyes found Eliza. Understanding dawned. I brought them your ledger, Eliza said. Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. Every crime, every bribe, every threat, 12 years of it, in your own handwriting. Silas's men shifted nervously. The crowd pressed closer. That ledger is private property, Silas said. Stolen from my home, inadmissible in any court. Maybe, the marshal said, but these folks deserve to hear what's in it. He opened the ledger and read, loud enough for everyone to hear, names, dates, amounts. The crowd's murmur grew with each entry. When he reached the entry about John Mercer's arranged accident, a woman in the crowd sobbed. That's a forgery, Silas said. My wife is unstable. I'm not unstable. Eliza's voice cut through his. I'm terrified. Of you. You murdered 2 wives before me. You told me last month I'd be next. I won't be wife number 3 found dead. Lies, Silas hissed. Draven Moss stood. It took effort. His legs shook and blood spotted his lips, but he stood. "Every word in that ledger is true," he said, "because I helped you write half of it. I worked for Silas Sohan from 1870 to 1885. I burned barns. I threatened family. I killed 2 men on his orders." He coughed, spat blood. "I'm dying. Consumption. Maybe 3 months left. I'm guilty, but he's guiltier." The crowd pressed closer, anger rippling through them like wind through wheat. Caleb stepped forward. "I'm the territorial surveyor who mapped this valley in 1867. That's my signature on every legitimate deed." He held up Tessa's father's deed. "This is John Mercer's original claim, dated June 1867. Witnessed by Judge Morrison, signed by me. It's authentic." He pulled out Silas's forged deed. "This is dated March 1888. Wrong ink, wrong paper, wrong notary seal. It's a forgery, and I'll testify to that in any court you want." The territorial clerk examined both deeds under lamplight. His voice carried across the silent crowd. "The 1867 deed shows proper ink oxidation. Paper watermark matches our 1807 batch. Surveyor seal is authentic." He looked up. "This deed supersedes all later claims." "Then what about the other families?" someone shouted. "The Jacobsons? The Swensons? How many forged deeds are there?" 11 that I know of," Caleb said. "Maybe more." The crowd erupted. Men shouted. Women wept. Silas's hired guns looked at each other, calculating odds. Marshal Garrett raised his hand. The crowd quieted. "Silas Sohan," he said, "you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, and conspiracy to commit murder. Federal Territorial Court will—" Silas drew his pistol. The crowd scattered. Women screamed. Men dove for cover. Silas fired into the air. "You're all dead. Every one of you." And he wheeled his horse and spurred hard toward the creek. His men followed, firing behind them to cover his escape. The marshal's rifle cracked. One of Silas's men fell from his saddle. The others kept riding. "The bridge!" Draven shouted. "He's heading for the bridge." Tessa ran for Dancer. Caleb was already mounting. They galloped after Silas, the marshal and 3 ranchers thundering behind them. The wooden bridge came into view, 40 feet long, spanning Sweet Creek where it ran deep and fast. Ice that still clung to the banks, but the water beneath had been eating away at it for weeks. Asher reached the far end first. 80 pounds now, nearly full grown. He planted himself in the middle of the bridge and growled, deep and primal. Silas reined up hard. His horse danced sideways. Behind him, the marshal and the others closed in. Ahead, the wolf blocked his escape. "It's over, Silas," Marshal Garrett shouted. "It ain't over till I say it is." Silas spurred his horse toward the wolf. "Stop," Caleb's voice cut through the night. "The ice won't hold." Silas didn't stop. His horse hit the bridge at a gallop. The wood groaned. Ice cracked beneath, sharp reports like rifle shots. Asher leaped aside. The bridge plank under Silas's horse gave way with a sound like breaking bones. Horse and rider plunged through. 40 feet down to rocks and rushing water, the horse screamed. The sound cut off when they hit. Tessa dismounted and ran to the edge. The marshal grabbed a rope from his saddle. Below, Silas thrashed in the icy current, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. The horse was already dead. "Throw the rope," the marshal shouted. "Let him drown," someone yelled from the crowd that had followed. "No." Marshal Garrett's voice was iron. "He'll stand trial. He'll answer for every crime. Then he'll hang legal." He threw the rope. Silas grabbed it. They hauled him up, broken, bleeding, defeated but alive. He lay on the muddy bank, shaking from cold and shock. His fine clothes were torn. His cattle brand ring was gone, lost in the current. Marshal Garrett knelt beside him. "Silas Sohan, you're under arrest. Federal court. Every crime read aloud. Then you'll hang, proper and legal." Silas looked up at Tessa. His eyes held nothing but emptiness now. "Your father," he whispered. "Wouldn't sell, wouldn't bend, just like you." "Yeah," Tessa said, "just like me." The marshal hauled him to his feet. Doc Hollis was already examining his broken leg, her face grim and professional. Behind them, the bridge groaned one last time and collapsed into the creek. Built with stolen money, held up by lies, finally giving way under the weight of rot that had been there all along. Spring was coming, the ice was breaking, and justice, delayed 12 years, had finally caught up. The federal judge arrived from Cheyenne 3 weeks later, February 10th, 1890. He held court in the church, the only building large enough for the crowd. Silas Sohan stood trial for conspiracy to commit murder, land fraud, extortion, and bribery. The evidence took 2 days to present: the ledger, Draven's testimony, Caleb's surveyor records, Eliza's account of 2 murdered wives, Doc Hollis's medical files showing the suspicious deaths. The jury deliberated for 40 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Silas Sohan, the judge said, "You are sentenced to hang by the neck until dead. Execution scheduled for March 15th, 1890. Silas said nothing, just stared at the floor with empty eyes. The syphilis had reached his brain. Sometimes he didn't recognize where he was. They hanged him on schedule. Tessa didn't attend. Neither did Caleb. They were rebuilding the ranch by then. The land office clerk, Peterson, was sentenced to 5 years federal prison and fined $1,000. The telegraph operator got 2 years for mail fraud. Doc Hollis's charges were dropped. The judge ruled she'd acted under coercion and had ultimately cooperated with justice. Eliza Sohan was granted her divorce. The marriage was annulled on grounds of fraud and endangerment. She received $4,000 from Silas's estate, restitution for her suffering. Last Tessa heard, she'd moved to Denver and opened a boarding house for women fleeing bad marriages. Draven Moss never made it to trial. He spent 6 weeks touring the territory with the marshal, testifying in 3 counties where Silas had forged land claims. He visited 11 families personally, confessing his role in their suffering, asking forgiveness he knew he didn't deserve. He died April 3rd. Consumption took him in his sleep at Doc Hollis's house. He was 67 years old. They buried him with military honors. He'd been a Union scout during the war, which most folks had forgotten. The preacher spoke about redemption, about how it's never too late to stand for what's right. 23 people attended the funeral. Families he'd once terrorized stood at his grave and prayed for his soul. Tessa thought her father would have approved of that. The land redistribution took months. Federal court appointed Caleb as chief surveyor, overseeing the validation of every claim in Sweet Creek Valley. Tessa's 320 acres were restored in full. 6 other families got their land back, 960 acres total. The water rights monopoly was dissolved by territorial decree. Sweet Creek was declared public access. No man could charge for what God had made free. Silas's remaining land, 1,200 acres, was auctioned. The proceeds went into a victim restitution fund, $18,400, enough to compensate 22 years of stolen value. The new land office clerk was a woman. The marshal insisted on it. Harder to bribe, he said, when she's got 3 kids to feed and a reputation to protect. May 5th, 1890. Tessa married Caleb on the land office steps, the same place where justice had been served 3 months earlier. The preacher performed the ceremony, doing it right this time, he said. 80 people attended. 6 rancher families, the marshal and Doc Hollis, the blacksmith, the general store owner. Children ran between the adults, laughing. Asher stood as witness. The crowd laughed warmly when Tessa introduced him that way. She wore a simple dress, not borrowed, not forced, her own choice. Caleb wore his surveyor's coat, freshly brushed. He'd pinned his compass medal to the lapel. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, the silence was peaceful, complete. "I do," Tessa said. This time she meant it. "I do," Caleb said, and smiled. They kissed to the sound of applause and wolf howl, Asher adding his voice to the celebration. The barn raising happened 2 weeks later. 12 families contributed labor. The new cabin went up in 4 days, 16 by 20 feet, stone fireplace, glass windows. Prosperity earned, not stolen. They hung her father's wolf-carved sign above the door, Mercer Ranch, Est, 1867. But Caleb added a second line underneath, Hale and Mercer, restored 1890. The garden went in late May. Potatoes, carrots, beans, corn. Caleb worked the rows while Tessa planted seeds. The smell of fresh-turned earth filled the air. Apple blossoms drifted from a wild tree growing near the creek. They restocked slowly. 6 cattle purchased from a neighbor at fair price, 12 chickens, Dancer and Caleb's horse Flint, a milk cow named Patience, not rich, but secure. July 10th, 1890, Wyoming became a state. Marshal Wade Garrett came to the ranch that afternoon. He wore a new badge, silver instead of brass, federal deputy marshal. "Territory needs honest men in office," he said to Caleb, "especially men who know every land claim in the valley. You interested?" Caleb looked at Tessa. She nodded. He took the badge, pinned it on. "Reckon I am." "Good," the marshal said, "because there's 6 other counties that need surveying, and I suspect we'll find more of Silas's forgeries once we start digging. Then we better get to work." That evening, Tessa stood on the porch of her new cabin. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the valley gold and orange. 7 homesteads were visible now, smoke rising peacefully from 7 chimneys. The creek ran free through all of them, giving life to crops that would feed families through the coming winter. Caleb came up behind her, slipped an arm around her waist. Asher lay at their feet, chin on his paws, eyes half closed in contentment. "You ever regret it?" he asked, running instead of marrying him. "Not once." She leaned back against him. "You regret leaving the mountains?" "Not once." In the valley below, children played near the creek. A woman called them in for supper. A man hammered at a fence post, finishing the day's work. Normal sounds. Peaceful sounds, the sounds of a valley healing. Tessa touched the wolf pendant at her throat, her father's, then touched the surveyor's compass Caleb had given her. Partnership symbol. Spring had come. The land was restored. The truth had won, not because it was easy, but because enough people had stood up and said enough. Folks ask me sometimes how a girl with nothing but a wolf pup and a piece of paper beat a man who owned half the territory. I tell them the truth. She didn't beat him alone. Courage don't mean you ain't scared. It means you do the right thing even when the whole world's lined up against you. Tessa had that. So did her father. So did every soul who stood in that land office and said, enough. See, evil's a patient thing. It don't announce itself with trumpets. It just takes a little here, a little there, water rights, a deed, a widow's claim, till one day you wake up and the law serves the thief instead of the people. But truth's patient too. It waits in chimney chinks and ledger pages. It waits in old surveyors who remember every signature. It waits in guilty men dying of consumption, seeking redemption before the end. And when the time comes, truth don't shout. It just stands up and says its name. That spring, 1890, the year Wyoming became a state, was the first time in 15 years the creek ran free through the whole valley. 7 families planted crops. 12 children learned to swim in water that used to cost their parents $15 a month just to touch. Tess and I raised that wolf, planted gardens, built a life her father would have been proud of. When Wyoming got its statehood that July, I wore a federal badge. She stood beside me. And the land, her land, earned not stolen, stretched out green and clean as far as we could see. I'm an old man now. Tess has been gone 6 years come winter. But every spring when the ice breaks and the creek runs loud, I remember, justice ain't a gift. It's a choice. And the choosing never stops. That's the story. That's the truth. And truth, once you let it breathe, don't die easy.